Hi, everyone. This is Jenny Bayless, and we have a special edition episode with Mark Jones from Top Choice Inspectors. How are you doing, Mark?
Hey, Jenny, I'm so glad to be here. Looking forward to this little podcast and super excited.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on. I know you and I have been working together for many years now, so I was excited to have you on the podcast to impart your wisdom to everybody regarding the inspection space.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of meet your audience and kind of explain how this home inspection could actually be used as a really, really good tool to help them make money in their their flipping or investing.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you could just give us a brief background regarding your experience, just to give everyone some context.
Sure. Hey, yeah, I kind of have a wild story on how I ended up in the home inspection business. I finished up school. I'm from the Midwest, the Detroit area, and found my way out to Colorado and started working. At the time, I was working kind of corporately, and then kind of moved into contracting. I really enjoyed working on homes and had some construction skills from my youth. So I started getting into actually doing some investments and did some flipping and owned a contracting company myself. And then when the great crash of '07 happened, I found myself in a weird spot with not a lot of work, and all these homes were being foreclosed on. So I'm partnered up actually with a couple people in the bank industry and started inspecting homes for banks. I would change the locks, winterize them, do all sorts of little things that they needed done. And I would continually monitor those homes monthly. And I noticed my list was getting shorter and shorter. And I was like, what's happening to these homes? Well, guess what? They were actually selling again. So around 2009, I said, hey, I could actually inspect these homes for realtors. So I kind of started a home inspection business. I worked for another guy who had a full-time inspection company. I had my contracting business on the side. And then by 2012, I was so busy, I just did this full time. From there, I've kind of done a couple inspection companies, one solo, one with some partners. And just like every good partnership, it ends. So I'm back to kind of running my own show with a bunch of employees now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been fun watching you grow your businesses over the past couple of years. And, I definitely can tell that you are really good at training your employee inspectors as well, so that they're, seeing the same things that you're seeing, and helping everybody out with that.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I've had, it's been fun to fall forward, right? I mean, anyone who says that owning a business is easy probably isn't doing it right. But it's been a great journey, and I really kind of teach my inspectors that if their mama isn't proud of their effort, they probably shouldn't work for me. So, yeah,
I
and
like that.
it pays forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I know when we were talking before, you mentioned that you're really keen on the fact that an inspection is just key to an investor's success. And I was wondering if you could maybe go into a little bit more detail about that concept.
Yeah, I mean, the home inspection is kind of it's an interesting part of the real estate process. For buyers, normal buyers who are going to move and live in their home, I'm a very important part of their life for like 10 minutes. They find me, they get the inspection, they negotiate, they move on. Where an investor, I think, could really, really use a great home inspection company. I really think there's like three parts to that whole process that is underutilized. Um, the main part of the inspection is obviously to find defects in the home before they're purchasing the property, right? And the biggest thing on investing, right, is you make money when you buy. If you buy right, you can sell right. If you overpay for something. And I think the best way, the absolute best way for investors to kind of go about it is meet with their home inspector and kind of decide what the best level of approach is. Not every inspection is the same. Are they needing a home inspection to find out everything? So they're going to take all that information back to the seller and say, hey, look at all the things we found. All this stuff needs to be fixed. We need to lower the purchase price. Or let's say they're kind of stuck on the purchase price. The seller knows what they have, and they need to know what they have to do to bring it to the level, whether it's going to be a tenant occupied situation, whether it's going to be a flip, whether it's going to be a income property, like they're going to maybe convert the basement to a living situation. There's lots of things we as inspectors can help with, kind of helping that cost, right? So you know what you're getting into in the beginning. And a lot of investors kind of skip that step. They're like, oh, I know stuff's going to be wrong. I'm going to remodel it anyway. And if you can use this as a negotiating tool, great. If you can use this as a informational tool and a negotiating tool, even better. And the third, and I think maybe one of the most important things is, if you're going to use this as a long-term rental, maybe a VRBO, anything like that, our inspection report, and here's the beautiful thing, it's all in the cloud now. So it's not just one document, it can be updated. So you could have a third-party company, like an inspection company, kind of do the legwork. We could be the bad guy, so to speak. We could, I know property management companies have different things, but we can hold feet to the fire. It could be a living, breathing document that can kind of travel with the inspection. The inspection could travel with the home throughout the journey of the investment process. And with everything being on the cloud now, it doesn't have to be a one and done scenario. So I think there's three huge benefits that investors can use depending on what their needs are at the time of purchasing the home.
Yeah, I agree. And something that I know I've mentioned to you that I really appreciate is that your reports capture the details surrounding a lot of the components. So, if a water heater goes out 5 years into owning a property, I don't have to scramble and try to figure out what the previous water heater was, what the size was, that sort of thing. I'm able to just go to that report and say, oh yeah, okay, it was a 40 gallon, blah, 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 and just kind of go from there. So I think that is also really nice that it captures the components of a home. So I really, really like that.
I mean, to be honest, the home inspection is almost the biggest waste of data collected I've ever seen. Like, I gather so much information, probably the most information that's ever been gathered on a structure at one time, maybe even more than actually at the build, because we assess more than just what the builders look at. So I have all this information essentially gathered and detailed in a multiple page report that's easily searchable, and essentially gets discarded on a daily basis. Like this, I mean, it is a colossal waste of information. I'm looking at multiple ways to kind of how that can benefit people, and I'm plugging that in the near future to a few programs. So
cool. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about that and how we can, better serve our buyers and everything as well on that back end.
That's right. Coming soon. You had to have me on again to get that.
Sounds good. So I was wondering, since this is a Colorado Springs podcast, I was wondering if you could kind of share with the audience what typical things that you would say are probably more prevalent in the Springs versus other areas. Like, for instance, hail. That's probably a very common issue that you find here. But what other items do you typically find that's pretty local?
Yeah, so Colorado Springs is a really, really wild place to live, right? Because you have extreme weather conditions. If you're looking kind of like the greater Colorado Springs area, you've got Fountain, Colorado down south, and then you've got Monument up north. You're going from 7,000 and 8,000 feet down to elevations of just like under 6,000 feet. So at 7,000 feet, there are certain changes that homes have to be built with. So you've got a 40 pound per square foot roof structure versus a 30 pound per square foot roof structure. You have more ice and water, that's a roofing component, requirements at certain levels. Elevation has one thing. The next thing is the soils. We have sandy soils up north, like in the Briargate area, it's very sandy, where you go down close to the mountain and there's some landslide issues. Couple that in with the rock rimmon mines and the I'm forgetting by UCCS there, the Cragmore mines. So there's so many different both unique characteristics to live in Colorado Springs. And there's actually an area even that has a hotbed of termites. So there's certain areas in each neighborhood. Having an inspector that's worked in this town and kind of knows what's going on with just that neighborhood really helps. and it also could help an investor too, kind of knowing like, hey, if this is the risk tolerance that you want to take on. Um, the other cool thing about Colorado Springs is that you go from these beautiful old homes that were built probably without even indoor plumbing, their kitchen and bathroom is an addition, to these gorgeous modern structures, like, not 10 minutes away. Being from a bigger city, if you literally had to travel outside where I'm from 15, 20 minutes before you got into the newer structures. So to have that, to be close to whatever you want to be and kind of find the house and what you like, it's all here in this city, and it's absolutely incredible. As an inspector, some of the other unique things, we don't see a lot of metal roofs here in Colorado, which you'd think would hold up better to the hail. A lot of asphalt, a lot of different types of construction, but for the most part, it's all wood framed, where you'd think maybe a lot more would be concrete or brick. Like that's where I'm from. I was used to a lot more brick homes. So, but the biggest and kind of weirdest thing, and this goes for most of Colorado in general, but a lot of people move here and they're like Colorado Springs, they go in the basement, and some people are like, whoa, what's a basement? But second, they see these walls, and the walls aren't nailed from the ceiling to the floor. There's this gap there. And people are like, what is going on? And when I explain that the whole floor can move and flex, and it's supposed to, that can be a weird pill to swallow for some people. So I have fun with it. I say, hey, the pool table leveling business is always busy, the basement pool table leveling. But Colorado Springs is such a wild, cool area, one, to live, but two, to even just how the history and the architecture is actually built to kind of say, hey, we can't beat the bentonite, the expansive soils, so let's join it with this floating wall basement. And it's been really cool to see how things have evolved.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe let's expand on that a little bit, because
Sure.
like basically I think that it's a foreign concept to most people, and especially myself, before I moved to Colorado, that, like you said, there's a floating wall and a floating floor in the basement. Can you explain to people what the detriment to not having that floating wall all the way up to the roof could entail?
Oh, absolutely. And so what happens here, we have bentonite or expansive soils. And what happens if that gets wet, and we're pretty dry here, but every now and then we get some massive rains. And when that gets wet, it heaves up. And a lot of people look at a concrete floor and they're like, oh, this is strong. In building terms, it's actually really weak. So the pressure that bentonite can create on that floor will actually move that slab with ease. So as it pushes up in the home, it'll begin to push the wall structure. So if the wall structure is not floating or able to move up and down, the wall structure will begin to push into the ceiling joists or the floor joists above it, started causing the first floor to start seeing some bowing and some cracking. And then that can even continue and start pushing into the second floor. So before like 92, they didn't require floating walls. And a lot of those older homes have some movement. And sometimes you can go in there and kind of hit the panic button because you're like, wow, why is this house uneven? And most of the time, all the heaving has taken place. As long as the grading's good, it's okay to have some movement, and we're okay with that. But if there's active cracks painted over, buckling in the drywall, then it's like, well, maybe this is still moving, and that's something we need to look at. But 95% of the movement is because the grading outside is allowing the water to get under there. So these newer homes, they have these floating walls, so it allows things to move. It doesn't stop the movement, and you still need to maintain your grading, but it does allow for some movement without showing signs of cracking or failure. And what they do is they take all the weight of the house, and when the engineers figured out they're great and smart, and they figure out how much the house weighs, they take all the load and they send it kind of down a structural column and sitting on a footer. So the bentonite doesn't have enough strength to move the footer, but it'll move the floor around it. So the deflection will be transferred to the floor. So around some of the structural columns, you actually see more movement, more heaving. And a lot of people hit the panic button with that. They're like, hey, Mark, what's going on here? Like, this is really popped up around this footer. It's actually doing its job. The house is not knifing into the earth. It's staying steady. but the bentonite is allowing the movement to go around the footer, causing like floor movement, but not structural movement. So some crazy engineering out here in Colorado, crazy stuff. Like the guys that thought of this, you know what I mean? Like amazing engineers. And I'm glad we
Yeah,
got them.
it's
Yeah.
fascinating that someone's able to calculate that way beyond the scope of my brain, I think. So
there's a lot of math involved, and there's a
yeah,
lot of math involved. I've done this a long time, and a lot of the engineers in town, they're great people. I mean, some of these guys are Columbia educated, like fantastic engineers, and their whole job is just to figure out load calcs the house and how much it's going to weigh fully loaded, you know, and will this, if the footer's too small, the house can actually start sinking in. If the footer's too big, it can actually start heaving. So it's amazing, like the math that just goes into building a home out here. So
yeah. And then I think another item that I would love for you to talk about is sewer lines, because that can be a huge cost to an investor. So
yeah, one of my previous trades is when I was doing it, I was in the plumbing trade. So hot's on the left and poop rolls downhill, right? So yeah, sewer lines. The great news is we can do sewer scopes, and you can do that before you buy. Most inspection companies, you know, I'd always like to say use Top Choice inspectors, but most home inspection companies can partner with a plumber, or they have the cameras themselves. Two benefits there. I have my own cameras. We can do sewer scope because we don't sell anything. Plumbers do sell sewer lines, so we can give a non-biased opinion. I do partner with a plumbing company. If you want a licensed plumber to look at the sewer line, I have that availability, and it's like $75 more. So I can go either way on that. But sewers are extremely expensive and sometimes super cheap all at one time. I've seen some of the worst looking sewer lines on camera just need a clean out, and I've seen minor hairline cracks need a full replacement. So sewer is like a big unknown. You don't know what's underground. And when you do a sewer scope, and I don't know all the investors' insurance policies, but there are some homeowners' insurance policies that will write a sewer rider that'll actually cover not only backup, but sometimes repair of the sewer line. So doing a sewer scope at the inspection is kind of like a timestamp for you, but also for the insurance company. You can say, hey, look, we did this scope before we purchased the home, and this is the shape it was in. And 3 days after you purchased it, all of a sudden there's sewer in your basement. The insurance company might hit the red flag button, but you already have a video done by a third-party company that has no interest in selling something, you know? So essentially we're a disinterested third party. So that's a huge benefit of doing sewer scopes that a lot isn't really talked about in the industry. That's like a little tidbit. If you get that rider from your insurance company, having our videos really helps if there's ever a problem. But second, I know some really good excavators here in Colorado Springs, and a lot of them own their own equipment and can do sewer lines for a lot less than maybe a lot of people quote. Sometimes plumbers add on the costs, their cost, plus they have to hire out the excavation stuff. So I do have good contacts as well. So that's another reason to have a home inspector, because we work with a lot of contractors and we can get stuff. But as Jenny knows, we did a sewer line on a really nice unit, and it had some issues. And I don't know what the cost on that one's going to be, but I've seen it in the tens of thousands of dollars sometimes. So
yeah, and I think that going back to the expansive soils, I imagine that has a lot to do with some of the old clay pipes and shifting on that end as well. Do you see that a lot?
we do see slip joints, absolutely. Okay. So that's kind of where the sewer line has kind of come apart at the junction. The old clay they were kind of fit together, and the soil has kind of separated them, and now they're kind of offset. That's a slip joint. Sometimes we see bellies, and that's where sometimes the sewer line has cracked. Sometimes it has leaked out of one of those slip joints, and it's kind of created a little cave. So the camera dips down into the sewer and comes back out. So it's kind of like underground for a while. I've heard some plumbers say, hey, if the belly's less than 8 feet, it's not a big deal. I've heard some plumbers say if the belly's less than 4 feet, it's not a big deal. It's not like an industry standard. But if it's catching a lot of debris, if there's a lot of stuff in that pipe, that could definitely be a potential for backup. Now, that being said, it could be something that could be cleaned out and maintained. I mean, Roto-Rooter is in business for a reason. You don't always have to replace the sewer line. Typically, the times that you really have to replace is when there's lots of cracking, to where when they're running the camera down there, they see lots of cracks, because if they run the hydrojet or the cutting wheel down there, they could actually cause more damage to it. If there's lots and lots of offset joints, lots and lots of root intrusions, to where you're cleaning it out, every third month, it's maybe time to sleeve it. And then obviously a break, and a failure in the sewer line, or a big massive belly, those can't be corrected with cleanouts. Those have to be repaired, which typically, especially if it's a belly, they can't usually sleeve that, because they have to literally dig up the pipe and they call it rebedding. They have to rebed the sewer line so it's got proper grade, which is typically 2%. 1% grade is acceptable, which is an eighth of inch of fall per foot.
Okay.
So
And
there's work to it.
Can you explain what a sewer sleeve is?
So a sleeving of pipe is kind of a newer technology. So it has like a bullet. It's like a steel bullet. It's got some fins on it. It actually pulls through the old sewer line, splitting the sewer line and pulling a new liner behind it. Mm-hmm. So it's one continuous liner. That way they're not digging up your whole yard. They just have to dig in a couple points. They tie the liner in, pull it across, and pull it out. So essentially that whole section is one continuous pipe. So less likely to get roots in there. It's a really nice product, but it doesn't always solve the problem. So
that's a really good option, though.
It is.
If it applies. That's great.
And far less cutting and digging. By cutting, I mean like concrete in the street, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that, going back to your point previously with the uniqueness of Colorado Springs and the types of homes that we have here, I know some of the ones that you and I have worked with closer to the downtown area, they have some strange routing, cutting through other people's yards and just all over the place. So I imagine that you probably see very long lines downtown as well.
Yeah, and sometimes they tie into the neighbors and they go into their garage and their foundation. I mean, when they built, when plumbing came to Colorado Springs, I mean, you got some homes downtown were built before indoor plumbing. So a lot of those homes there, instead of the sewer line, which a lot of people think go out the front of your home, a lot of them out there go out the back. And downtown has such weird, unique lots that sometimes out the back means out your backyard, into your neighbor's backyard, down the street, and then it ties in. They weren't as concerned with lot lines and property things. And the other thing downtown we get into is grease traps. So the kitchen is on a separate sewer line that goes out, and it has a box in the yard, literally for catching the grease. And those can be a big issue, and they're always separate from the toilet line. And so you can actually have two sewer lines on your property on some of those downtown ones. And those grease traps typically get abandoned. Sometimes they reroute the sewer around them. Sometimes they're still active, and those you can't scope past it, because my camera essentially goes and just bloop, drops in, and that's it. So yeah,
that's really interesting. I hadn't heard of that before. So that's good to know. And I know something else that that you have found on many of our properties is electric panels. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk about what you typically see around here for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Colorado Springs has a really unique history with electricity, with even Tesla's being here. They've had multiple different services. We have Colorado Springs Utility being owned by the city. I mean, it's a really cool setup, but I've seen multiple meters being improper. We've got 240 volt service on a 120 volt meter, where the city just hasn't come out and switched that yet. But the biggest thing we do see here is the Federal Pacific Stab Lock panel. And pretty much if your home was built like late 70s, maybe 80, if they had one left on the truck, through like early 60s, probably had a Federal Pacific Stab Lock panel in it. There is two types of electricians on Federal Pacific Stab Lock panels. One of them is the electrician that says, oh, they're all going to burn down eventually. That's kind of like saying all plumbing is going to leak. And they kind of scare people into having to replace them. There's other electricians that'll come out and look at them and say, hey, it's working fine now, but it is old. You might want to consider replacing it. But either way, no company will really certify those panels anymore because they lost their UL listing. So if you're looking at a home in that 30-year age range there, you're probably going to have a Federal Pacific or a newer panel. They shouldn't scare investors at all. They can be replaced, and it's a great negotiating point. You can say, hey, look, you can't certify this. Neither can the next person that's going to buy the house. So, maybe I know the market's hot, but you can always try and negotiate with it, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think when safety comes into play, both buyers and sellers are more amenable to each other's, needs in that realm, as opposed to something more on the cosmetic side of things. So, yeah, I know we have replaced many Federal Pacific panels in our day.
And sometimes they can't be replaced. Sometimes they have to be closed off, and the panel has to move outside just because new building standard.
Oh, so, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Some of that's changing, location, and that's that kind of comes into this mystery gray area that people say that it's a 4-letter word in the home inspection industry. It's called code. People ask me all the time, is my home to code? The real answer is no. My home's not to code. Your home is not to code. Code changes. Mm-hmm. So we don't inspect for code. We inspect for safety and function, and we try and look at when the home was built, like what was required at this time. Like if you're buying a home built in 1940 and it doesn't have grounds, yeah, we're going to write up it's not grounded. But let's be honest, it wasn't built with grounds either. It didn't even exist. So there has to be a little bit of knowledge on what you're purchasing, in the age range. I kind of take some of my clients outside when they're kind of feeling overwhelmed, and we kind of look at some of the neighbors' homes in the driveway. I say, look, I'm going to find about 80% of the stuff on this home and this home that I'm finding here because it's built at this time frame. And these are kind of some of the challenges you face. So it's all relative. It really is when it comes to things like that. And just being mindful of what you're purchasing and having a good inspector that can educate you, like, hey, yeah, this isn't right and it's not to current code, but it's safe and it's functional. Mm-hmm. And that's more important, I think, than if it's to code. So.
That's what I really appreciate about you guys is that I've never left an inspection, of my own feeling scared that, the house is going to explode or something like that. You put things into reasonable perspective. Okay, you are going to need to focus on this probably, like, let's not really focus on this. And I think that's really good. And I know that my buyers also truly appreciate that because, we want to make sure that the homes are as safe as possible for our tenants who are living in there. But mm-hmm. if it's not a safety issue and it's not something that's going to impact their quality of life, and it's just something we need to be mindful of and keep an eye on, I think that is really key.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the big things is the handrail baluster spacing is a great example. Before like 78, they didn't require any spacing distance. After 78, it was 6-inch, and then now it's 4-inch spacing. So to go into a 1960s home with a foot gap, am I going to put in the report? And could someone fall through it? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to say, oh, this isn't the code, and this is, it's something that should be fixed and something you could relatively do. But to expect a seller to kind of rebuild a home because the standard has changed is a little unrealistic, Mm-hmm. And also that's a cheap fix. I would rather keep my eyes on the big things like the roof, the furnace, things that have multiple thousands of dollar repairs. All because my report may say safety issue doesn't mean expensive.
Hmm.
And I always like to focus on that. One of the things that kind of gets lost in the weeds are windows, right? Like windows can be a very, very expensive item if you replace all of them. But not all the time, all of them need to be replaced. And it's okay just to do a couple windows. Some people think if you're doing windows, you have to do all of them. Pick 2 or 3 that are an issue, replace them every couple of years. Before you know it, you've got it done.
Yep.
You don't have to eat the elephant all in one sitting. So, but I would say windows are kind of like a hidden expense that a lot of people don't look at. That kind of gets overlooked during the home inspection as a function. Another thing that's fairly expensive that people don't really talk about, and I think they should talk more about, is if they're going to do some remodeling, they're really cracking down on the lead and the asbestos testing now. So if you start pulling permits in Colorado Springs and you've got popcorn ceiling built in the 80s, or 70, 78, even I've never seen one in the 80s tested yet, but in the late 70s, the potential of having asbestos could be there, and you start doing some work and scraping it, and someone calls on you, you could get yourself in some hot water. So it's something to consider.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's really interesting.
yeah, they're really starting to kind of crack down on some of that environmental hazard stuff. So
Makes sense.
especially if you're hiring contractors that aren't certified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want that spreading throughout and getting people sick and all that. So that makes total sense.
But if you catch it before if you do all these things and catch it before you buy, these are all things that you can go back to the seller and negotiate on. If you wrote the contract that way. I'm not a realtor.
Yep.
I know contracts are getting written very interesting right now. But if that's something you're like, and there's also ways to encapsulate asbestos, and those are things that can also be talked about and game plan for if you're in planning. If you're planning on purchasing investment in certain time periods, these are all conversations you should probably have and things you should consider.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's really enlightening. So I know that you alluded that you have a very interesting story. So I was wondering if you could share that with everybody to kind of, shed some light as to an interesting day in your world.
Well, Jenny, I tell people all the time, if I wrote a book, they'd put it in the fiction section because they'd be like, there's no way this happens. Sellers tend to, they tend to live one way, and then when they go to sell the home, they clean and they live like it's a model home. And as soon as the home's under contract, they like all their inner, like how I really live kind of pukes all over the house. And sometimes it's pretty incredible, like some just the personal items that people have no shame leaving out. But to be honest, a good example of a home, oh man. So this is one that just happened this year. In fact, just a few weeks ago. So I go to a home, and the family owned the home. They built the first floor. Granddaddy built the first floor in the 40s, and they lived in it. So it was a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, living room, and then a garage. Well, they decided that they're going to add onto it, and then they added onto it again. So each generation added a story up from this 1940s cinder block home construction. Probably shouldn't have been added up 3 times. Maybe one pop on the top would have worked. But needless to say, they turned a living room into a garage. So a garage is a huge hole in the house. And the way the house was designed, that was actually the structural wall that they decided to remove. So they probably had, thousands of pounds sitting on the header, which if you look in a normal construction home, a header is probably a 12 to 14 inch micro laminate beam, or maybe even a steel I-beam that's over the garage doors. Well, 2 2x4s, that's what they had holding up the whole house. So you literally could be in the kitchen upstairs and you could jump and you felt the whole floor system sag. So, and I'm kind of a bigger guy. I was afraid to death of jumping. So they said, hey, okay, so maybe 2 2x4s wasn't enough. So they went ahead and put a telephone pole right in the middle of the garage, door opening. So you open your garage door to be greeted by a telephone pole that was kind of notched to hold the 2x4s in the middle to kind of help support it, because that's really going to solve the problem of the undersized structural beam. So, well, then they were like, well, we need another bathroom. So they went ahead and 2x6 joists, PVC plumbing pipe is 3-inch. So they went ahead and had a 2x6 joist, and they went ahead and drilled 4-inch holes in the middle of every single one of the floor joists, just to go ahead and run a new bathroom for the master bath that was above this super safe garage. So not only did they have a 2x4 headers, they had like 7 joists that were completely cut out. So you had maybe an inch on top and bottom holding this.
And there's presumably a bathtub that gets filled with water that goes
on this? Thank goodness it was just a shower. They had that just a shower. If you were worrying about how the shower drained, you're in luck, because it had just a bucket underneath it in the garage to catch the leaks.
Okay.
Yeah, it was utterly amazing. And but what's funny is, out of all those things, all the crazy structure, I mean, the whole plumbing, we brought in a plumber, they're going to have to redo the whole plumbing, redo the whole thing. The home still had value because of its location, and 2, like, all that stuff, as bad and as crazy as that sounds, it could all be fixed.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it's going to take a few dollars, but even that could be fixed. And they used my report as a negotiating tool. And I don't know the exact number. I never know exact numbers what they got off the report, but they got enough off the report to still make it worth, from my inspection report, to still make it worth their while to actually do this. They're going to have to do like a semi tear down of this whole section of the house and rebuild it. And because of my inspection report, they were able to negotiate that. And that was a huge find.
Yeah.
I literally took one picture of this whole situation that was going on in this new garage that they handmade, and sent it to my team and said, there's 10 defects. There's 10 issues in this one picture. I told them pop quiz, they need to name them all. And they worked together. They ended up getting them all. There was an electrical issue, and there was a firewall issue, and some other minor stuff that, didn't really make it. But I mean, this whole home, essentially, for the last 8 years since they did this remodel, was being held up by maybe a total of 22 inches of wood over a 12-foot span.
Wow.
So yeah. If they would have had like a water bed in there, it would have been curtains. It would have been really.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a really good point, is the negotiations piece to it. Investors, they're return on investment focused. And I mean, you guys have saved us tens and tens of thousands of dollars on our personal portfolio over the years. I mean, our very first deal that we did together, I don't know if you remember, but it had that big structural issue in the crawl space.
I won't forget that one. That was a lot of fun. I will not forget that one. That was,
We negotiated that. And got that fully repaired. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I know, like, as we're doing this chat, the market is hot right now, and people are waiving inspections. As a home inspection company, if you want to waive the inspection, I get it. You're like, hey, this is money we can't afford. I would say never ever waive the inspection, but I do offer a product, Jenny, that we do just the major systems. So the structure, the roof, the furnace, the electrical panel, and the water heater. And then we could do a sewer scope and a sewer scope and a radon test if needed. And it's more cost effective. It's less money because we obviously aren't doing that stuff, but it's good for investors if they're like, look, we're going to gut job this anyway, but we want someone else to look at the major systems. We offer that too.
Yeah.
So just as kind of a helpful thing in this crazy market. But as I've seen kind of your portfolio, we had some fun, didn't we? Wasn't there a bit of asbestos in an attic one time we discovered?
Yeah.
And that kind of goes also with the quality inspection company. Like, those folks had purchased that home really recently, and the guy didn't go in the attic. And of course, I kind of popped up there, and like I said, like, this glory, I can fit in some small holes. You'd be surprised. And sure enough, there was asbestos in that attic. So
and the handyman wiring that you found with the extension cord running under the floor to power the oven, that was a little bit frightening that you found that one. So that, needless to say, got fixed as well. Yeah, or negotiated to be fixed.
So,
Yeah.
so potential investors listening, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're hearing us chat about some stuff, but the good news is it's all fixable. Like,
Yes.
I
Yep.
very, very rarely see something that can't be fixed.
Yep.
So if you
Exactly.
go in that, yeah. Man, we've had some stories, haven't we? Some fun crawl space sewer scopes and some
Yep.
tenant occupied inspections that were a little interesting.
I know
So
Gary on your team found a tree trunk holding up a home not
yeah.
too long ago. So
it's coming right from the source, you know. Just don't bother milling it or engineering it. Just cut it down and stack it in there. So
yeah.
we've
So,
had we had Jared also found a couple Home Depot like cement pallets. They're sturdier, you know, with a car jack that was supporting a home. Yeah, that was a good one. So it was a 2-ton jack, so you know it was not nearly strong enough, but it was there.
Yep.
It was there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sometimes your role is just the beginning to the discovery process, you know, because like once you guys identify an area of problem, that's when during that inspection objection period, resolution period, you want to call in that licensed professional to come in and provide an assessment on how to fix that. And that's kind of what you use to tailor your negotiations at that point. So yeah, it's a deep process, but it's a very important one to get into.
yeah, and I think used right, the inspection report can be a negotiation thing. And in this hot market, if let's say you are going to sell one of your reports, we can come into a pre-listing inspection. We can find everything, we detail it out. And even if it's bad, like even if there's like a bunch of stuff, and you can literally say, hey, you know, we know about this. We're not going to fix it. And we've priced the home accordingly. Make your offers, but we're not fixing any of this. So sometimes doing a pre-listing inspection takes the teeth out of the negotiating too. If you have investments that you're looking to turn, maybe, I know one of your things is kind of having a smaller one, flipping it and maybe doing what the 1031 exchange, right? And moving up to a bigger one. And there may be a couple surprises on that, on that 1031 flip where you're not going to get as much money as you wanted. Well, if we come in, we do a pre-inspection, one gives you an opportunity to fix some stuff before you list it. And then we'll come back in and amend the report. The other thing too, is that you can say, hey, you know, this is what's wrong. And it, like in this market, you're saying, look, we know it and we're not fixing it. So
yeah, priced accordingly.
Make your offers. Yep. Make your offers. So
yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, the sold as is type situation. And I mean, I always recommend to my clients still get a third party inspection and include the inspection termination. That way, you know, you're of the understanding that you're not able to negotiate at that point. That's just kind of where we are in the market in some cases, but never put yourself in a position where you're married to that property or else you're going to lose your earnest money. So I think that's really, you know, important to have that done. And yeah, and something else that I appreciate about you guys is, I don't know if you remember the one inspection that we, you know, walked in, saw a couple of things. The house was just so bad. And we're just like, okay, I think we can, we can just kind of cancel this one at this point.
I do know it was a ranch style home. I remember that one. Yes, I do.
Yeah. It's just some things just, you know, don't pencil out. And you know, it's good to have that opinion, something that you don't see beneath the surface to an untrained eye.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as your new potential clients and everyone who's listening to these podcasts, because you're a rock star and your company is just doing incredible things. I mean, I've got to see that grow. You know, you have firsthand knowledge and you can advise your clients like, hey, I've been down this road personally. I've done it. And that's invaluable information, like experience you can't treat. You should write a book. Oh, I think you did. I think people should read it too. But no, it's the home inspection is a great tool, and it also gives you as the a buyer to kind of marinate on the decision, also marinate on that, because sometimes it can be emotional. And I know a lot of investors are great at, just what does the spreadsheet say? Does the money work? Does this work? But every now and then there's a little hint of, could I actually rent this out? Like would I be okay with that? There's a little morality sometimes involved in that too. And being able to spend 2 or 3 hours in a home and being comfortable with it. Also, it can give a peaceful feeling about the investment. So,
Yeah. Well, Mark, this was just fantastic. I could listen to your stories all day. It's just so enlightening and so incredibly helpful for people that are, investing in homes, no matter what strategy you're participating in. So, would you be able to share with everybody how to get in contact with you, and then we'll link to it in the show notes as well, in case you're driving and can't write this down.
Yes, thank you. Topchoiceinspectors.com. We've got an online schedule you can book there, or you can reach us by phone at 719-581-7080. And we work from South Denver all the way to North Pueblo.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark. This was fantastic.
Hey, thank you. Oh man, next time. So, teaser for next time, my data play, we'll have to get together, and I'll have a couple other doozies for you. So.
Sounds good. It sounds like a plan.
Well, thank you. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, everybody.